Damascus were very scrutinizing in the security checkups today as people tried to head into the city. Again, too early to say if the turnout would be good, but judging from what we're seeing so far, the turnout is acceptable. Again, too early in the day to give a final judgment on that.
You've talked about all the security in place. Has there been any actual violence yet, as is widely expected?
Well, it hasn't, but we have seen a series of measures taken by the Syrian military in the past 2 days to counter these violence. We have seen an intensified waves of shelling against rebel-held areas adjacent to Damascus yesterday evening and at dawn today. Maybe a message to rebels that the Syrian government don't want any problems today, and if such should any problems occur, the Syrian government would retaliate actually violently against these attacks. So far, no attacks. Again, too early in the day, less than 3 hours into the vote has started. Still too early to determine whether this will be a violent day or not. Obviously, everyone here in Damascus and across Syria hopes that this day would go smoothly.
Of course. Now, voting's only taking place in government-held areas. Who actually is going to be voting? I mean, are people fearing that they have to vote, fearing retribution that if they don't?
No, actually, there's not. We have heard rumors from from several opposition sources that there will be retribution against citizens who won't take part in the elections. But actually, I've visited 2 or 3 polling stations so far. There are no measures to keep track of who voted and who did not vote. As a result, it doesn't seem that there will be retributions against those who do not vote. Obviously, the Syrian government would like the people to vote. Obviously, it's encouraging people to vote. We will see a huge turnout from the government employees. We'll see a huge turnout from possibly university students. All areas related to the government would see a huge turnout in these places. Not in fear of retribution, but this is the places where the Syrian government enjoys a great deal of support usually.
Bashar al-Assad, of course, the most likely candidate to win, despite there being 2 people running against him. Will this legitimize his rule, do you think?
Well, this is a very tricky question. The Syrian government says that this is a constitutionally mandated elections and they had to go ahead with it despite the difficult situations across the country. However, if we see a scene in Syria similar to what we saw in Lebanon a few days ago, where we saw a huge turnout in a country which is usually considered a country filled with people who are supporters of the Syrian opposition, and yet we've seen a huge turnout in that country of Syrians living there. This could mean that Bashar al-Assad is enjoying more popularity than many are willing to acknowledge in the West, because the West is the main criticizer of the current elections. But to say whether this will give the legitimacy needed or not, I think this would be we couldn't say that about these elections, because the elections are going under circumstances that are not, let's say, ideal, to say the best.
This is, of course, the first time in decades that there's been more than one candidate at all. What's the feeling from the people you're talking to about the other 2 candidates standing against the president? Because they're unknown quantities, aren't they?
Well, one of them is very well known here in Damascus. Dr. Hassan al-Nouri has been a minister for 2 terms and a member of the parliament also for 2 terms. He's very well known and established businessman here in Damascus. But again, and the other candidate is Maher al-Hajjar, who is an ex-communist and activist in the Syrian Communist Party. Both of them don't measure to Bashar al-Assad, obviously, and they stand no chance against President Bashar al-Assad in this current elections. But actually, in Syria right now, no one does. Even if we think about the most important opposition figure that we could wrap our heads around, no one is a legitimate threat to Bashar al-Assad. Assad enjoys a wide support from many people, from the Syrian army, from the security forces, from the police forces, from many parts of the Syrian community. As a result, I can't think of anyone who would be a legitimate threat to Assad's bid for re-election.
Okay. Ala Ibrahim in Damascus, thanks very much indeed. To other news now, and at least 5 people have died and several have